Hello, my name's Chris Beard from F11 Landscapes. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we have another instalment of our very popular Friday feedback series. This is where our members can send in images to have them reviewed live online. If this is the kind of thing that interests you, jump over to our F11 Landscape group on Facebook, click to become a member, we'll accept you, and then all you have to do is wait till we post a request asking for images for the Friday feedback session, upload your images, and you may be fortunate enough to be selected, and we'll look at some of your images online at one of our next sessions. If you are into your landscape photography, then please also consider subscribing to this channel. We're going to be producing lots of videos over the coming weeks, months and years. And there's going to be not only Friday feedback, but we're also going to be having videos on image processing. We're going to be having videos on photographic techniques. And then next year, once this lockdown's over, we're going to start producing some on-location videos. So you can actually come out and join me virtually as I go to a location and plan a shoot, go through pre-visualization techniques to see how I get the best out of that scene. And then we'll come back to the office, we'll put the images on the computer, we'll go through some processing, and we'll see whether my thoughts are successful or not. So there's lots to look forward to. Like this channel, hit the bell icon to be notified of any future updates, and please give us a like. We start off with the road to Ogleborough, an image by one of our members, Ian Bale. Now, Ian's been posting quite a lot recently, some lovely photographs from the northeast of England, and here's another one for us. So let's first of all just do a quick assessment of the image. We have this leading line of this road leading down. Obviously it's the road to Ogleborough, as Ian's told us. We have a tree on the left-hand side of our image, a beautiful tree, pine tree, illuminated by the sunlight. We have the hedges going down the edges of the road there. We have the fields off in the distance with a lovely patch of sunlight around the farm in the mid-distance, right over to the hill in the distance, which has got a dusting of snow on it. What a lovely image. Thank you for sending this one in to us, Ian. Well, let's have a look first of all at where the main points of interest are in this image. So I think first of all we have the tree here on the left hand side, the way that's lit. We have our road leading down here. We have this farm in the mid distance and the snow capped in the distance. So those are our 4 points of interest. Is there anything that we can do to maybe strengthen this image? Well, last week we used curves quite a bit, so let's jump into curves once again. If I move it down here, you will see in the top right hand corner we have a little button that's called Auto. Now of course Photoshop doesn't know what we're looking at, so it makes its best guess at what it thinks would be a good curves adjustment to make. So let's click it and see what happens. Now, can you see it has enhanced the lighter areas, maybe darkened the shadows a little bit, but the colours have changed a little bit as well. That's not what the photographer was wanting. However, if we come up to our layers panel, and we can see our blend modes here, at the moment it's on normal, but if we click it and go down to luminosity, we can see that we haven't adjusted the colours, we've just adjusted the lights and the darks of the image, maybe giving it that little bit more contrast, which makes it a little bit more punchy. And the reason why the colours change as well is in the curves adjustment layer, we are adjusting all 3 channels, our red channel, our green channel and our blue channel. And they're all being adjusted at different rates. And quite often that will throw the colours in the image out. So if we just come up, as I said before, to our blending modes, click on that and tick luminosity, which is at the bottom, that will restore all the colours to as they were in the first place. Now, what it's done is put a layer mask on, and I think we can now pick up our brush and just darken the edges of our frame. Obviously this is purely to personal taste, but I'm just doing it very quick. But if we just darken the edges, it then tends to focus our eye a bit more in this midground. How's that? Just one more thing, if we just have a recap on our points of interest, we can see they're on the left, the bottom, middle, and over there. And if we look over on this side, there isn't really a huge amount of interest on that side of the image, is there? So let's have a look at taking a different crop. Let's try a 1:1 crop. Now, of course, all these adjustments are purely to personal taste, and just because I'm suggesting them doesn't mean that they are right. It's up to you as the photographer. It's your image at the end of the day. You decide what you like. But if we just crop it just here like so, it then distills all those main elements that we have in our image. It gives us a nice balance between the tree here on the far left of our image with the hill on the far right. We still have our lane and we have our farm there. So say a square crop is just one idea to maybe strengthen that image a little bit more. Feel free to leave comments and let me know what you think. Let's move on to our next image. So next up is a beautifully captured spider's web, obviously one early morning by one of our members called Ildi. Now I think what Ildi's done really well here is she has got that spider's web really, really sharp and used a very, very wide aperture, probably something like f2.8, and that allows the background to become really soft and diffused. That helps to make her main subject stand out an awful lot more. Obviously it's really atmospheric. Once again, maybe a crop could strengthen the image and help the viewer's eye just to focus in on what is important. So if we just take a 4:3 crop there, just come in a little bit more from our edges. Something like that might strengthen it. I also think if we come to our friendly curves tool again, we might want to just put a little bit of an S-curve, and an S-curve actually improves the contrast, and as we learnt before, it changes the colours. So if we go back to as it was, or it's only very, very subtle on this image, but I still think it makes quite a difference and make that web stand out a lot more. And those berries in the background, or are they rose hips? They could be too distracting if they become too bright, and we can pick up our opacity slider and just dial that down a little bit so those berries aren't as distracting to the viewer. But again, it's all down to personal taste. But a really nice image, and thank you Ildi for sending that one in. Let's move on to our next one. Now, this is by Mark Head, and it's obviously Tower Bridge down in London. Mark's one of our regular contributors and he's been posting a lot of exceptional images recently. You've probably seen a couple of his have made photo of the week and been our banner images. So well done to Mark and thank you for supporting us. Right, this is a lovely long exposure to get the lights on probably a bus trailing through the frame. It's very easy to overexpose images like this, so Mark has handled it really well indeed. I think it's probably been shot a little bit late at night, and if we can just take a quick look, we can see here how the edges of the tower really blend in with the dark sky. I'd like to see a little bit more what we call separation, and if the image was taken a little bit earlier in the evening, then the sky would be brighter and we would actually get that separation and the tower would be a lot more defined for us. Now, another thing I noticed as well is it's not straight. It is perfectly horizontal. If we bring one of our little rulers or guidelines down, we can see that the rail or the edges of the bridge, that's perfectly level. But if we bring one of our vertical rulers out, we look at the bridge supports here and they are way off. And if we actually come over to the tower and put it on the edge of the tower, we can see the tower is actually leaning over to the right. If we put it right down the middle, we can see the top of our line is going through the real apex of that cross, but as it comes down, it's a little way off to the right. Now, I think that's probably been cut. I mean, obviously, the photographer has demonstrated exceptional skill levels here, but I think that's probably because the camera is pointed down ever so slightly. And when you point your camera up or down, any vertical lines start to converge on a point towards the top of the frame. So we call them converging verticals. Because the lens points down, then any vertical lines in our top part of our image will actually start to lean in like that. Conversely, if we tilt our cameras down a bit, then the verticals in the bottom half of our image will tilt in like that. And that's what we call converging verticals. So I think we have a very slight indication of that here, but it doesn't detract from the image at all. And just while we're on, I think also this area in the top left-hand corner of our frame is maybe a little bit too bright. Maybe if the photographer went back there, then he could maybe just take a couple of steps forward and frame it again, and that way we wouldn't have that bright illumination in the top left-hand corner. But Mark, another exceptional image. Thanks so much. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Now this is from one of our admins, Stephen Cheatley, St Michael's Mount down in Cornwall. Stephen's photographed it just as the sun's gone down. It's that beautiful soft light that we get at blue hour. It's very sharp all across the image, which is, I'd expect nothing less from Stephen. And we can see the colours, the pinks and the blues and the yellows starting to form in the sky. Yeah, and lovely image. And Stephen has also cropped it well, I feel. He's made the crop to suit his image. There are a couple of issues I'd just like to point out on our way to looking at how, if you ever found yourself in this position, how your thought processes could maybe help you develop an image and I'm very big on pre-visualization. So I'll just talk you through a few things here with the help of Stephen's photograph. So the first thing I notice is the vegetation, the trees on the mount, they're all very dark, and I think some of them have actually been what we call blocked up. There's no detail in there at all. Very quick and dirty. If we just pick our curves layer up and move the bright point over to the left, we can see that there's no detail in those areas there. Now, when we get dark areas like that, certainly in this one, in the middle of our frame, which is the base of our main subject, then our eyes don't like to stay there. If you're looking at that image, I would imagine your eyes are probably starting to look at the houses here where we can resolve detail. They're probably looking at the colours in the sky behind, but they're not lingering around here because, as I said, it's just too difficult for our eyes to resolve any detail in there. It becomes almost a no-go area for us. I think there's two ways that we could maybe photograph this particular scene. I think the first way is we could make two exposures. We could make a longer exposure, which would render detail in the trees for us and make the whole mount a bit brighter. And then we could take a second exposure, a faster shutter speed, which will actually darken the sky and allow more of those colours to come through. I do think there's a case for putting a graduated neutral density filter over that part of the sky there to darken it a little bit. Not to make it grey, but to help bring out some of those colours. Now we can, I said there was two ways of doing it. So that's one, take two images and blend them together. The other one is by using something called luminosity masks. I've got some loaded here and I'll just give you a very brief look at how we use them. We come to the curves, and if we take our, let's say our shadow darks, it's not a tutorial on using luminosity masks. I just want to show you what is available. Maybe we'll do something in the future. So can you see by moving our curves now, just the very dark areas of our image are being affected. It's masked out all the bright areas and just done, or just lifted the shadow areas. So that's on our dark layers, but we can also do the same with our bright areas. So if we come to our lights, then we can slowly start to darken them, and you'll see it's just darkening the lights. But we don't just have a lights level, we have expanded lights, light lights, bright lights and super lights. So we can do this on every single one of these channels, and each one is going to be darkening a different area of our brights in our image. Okay, so as you can see there, we've now brought out an awful lot of colour in that sky, and we haven't affected the details on the island. And if you just think back a few seconds, I did say about a neutral density filter would probably just help to darken this very top area of the image as well, because I don't think it's always a good idea to have bright areas on the very edge of our frame. But as I say, that's a very quick and dirty look at using processing to enhance our image. So Stephen had produced an exceptionally good base image, and with a little bit of judicious processing we can actually enhance that. So we can do it digitally in Photoshop, or as I suggested first off, we could maybe make 2 images and blend them together. So let me know what you think of that. Have I gone too far with it? What we can do, put these layers into one group, and we can just adjust the opacity of those adjustments that we've made. So we can have full 100%, or we can go back to the image Stephen took at the outset. Lovely image, Stephen. Thanks for sending that in. Let's move on to our next image. This is by one of our oldest F11, or as we used to be, Improve Your Landscape Photography members, Andy Roberts. Thanks for submitting this one, Andy. This is one of the ones I didn't get around to doing last week. A really lovely monochrome black and white image. I love this one, Andy. I think it's well composed. We've got all the steps in going up. We've got the tree as our main image. We've got the steps curving round the tree. We've got just a little bit of water on the left hand side. I think you've taken a long exposure which has got the clouds blurred, and we can see the blurring is in that type of effect. So that tells us that either whatever breeze or movement in the clouds was going from behind us directly away from us, or coming towards us directly, which is an excellent way to have it when you're doing a long exposure. I'll just remove those lines. What we don't really want is any clouds going that way or that way, because that would tend to detract from our image. Going the original way, and those bright areas of cloud are actually focusing our attention on your main subject, the tree. So that is really well done, and there's loads of detail in the image. Now, I touched on backgrounds last week, and if we're looking now, I would suggest that our eye isn't very happy in those 2 areas. Our eye's more happy looking at the steps going up, the tree, and what's all going on around. That's because those areas are really dark, and just as in the previous image from Stephen, our eyes don't tend to linger around the dark areas because they find it very difficult to resolve detail. But if I change our background canvas to black, see what happens. Now the surrounding area is black, our eyes can very easily pick out detail in these darker areas. So for images like this, if we are going to print them out, it might always be best to print them with a black mount. If we go back to the off-white background, then these areas, even though there is detail and we can force our eyes to resolve that detail, it's not easy. Our eyes are far happier looking at the brighter areas in the image. How can this image be improved? Well, only very, very slight changes. One thing, the branches of this tree here are overlapping with the tree on the left-hand side. Might be good to get a bit of separation. As this tree grows bigger, then that's going to become harder and harder. Herd of scissors and a bit of gardening. If we can't manoeuvre ourselves into a position where we can create that separation, then we could maybe just snip off the edges of those branches. Pretty drastic, I know, but I would always try to manoeuvre myself into a position whereby I can create that separation. I'm not advocating we go out into the landscape with scissors, shears, strimmers and start doing a lot of gardening. But it's just one very minor thing. I suppose we could also just trim them off with the clone tool in Photoshop. One other thing is, because we said about this dark areas down at the bottom, now there is plenty of detail in there, so that's not a problem. But I'm just wondering whether the tide comes in here and what the image would look like if we waited till the tide got to that kind of level and we once again took our long exposure. How would that look? I don't know. Might kind of complete the arc from the water here coming around the corner. I wouldn't know. It's just a suggestion off the top of my head. I don't know the location, but this is an exceptional image. Thanks, Andy. And let's move on to our final image of the evening, Angela ONeill. Thanks, Angela. Really, really nice panoramic landscape. I would probably say it's up in Scotland somewhere. The colours are lovely, it's sharp, horizons level. Yeah, what is not to like about this? Can we take it a step further though? Well, do you remember our very first image we looked at? Ian Bale's beautiful landscape with the tree on the left hand side, the snowy hill in the distance. And we looked at where the main points of interest were in the frame. Well, we can do the same here. Well, we have this little spit of land here with the sunlight on it and the sunlight here as well. We have the peaks of the mountains in the distance. We have this little lochen here. And we've also got what I can see here, this lovely rolling cloud here. So I would suggest that those are our main points of interest. You might disagree, saying that I'm right on this. I'm just saying it as I see it. Let's go back to something I suggested earlier and how we crop our images, and we crop to suit. So let's do a little crop just to take in those main points there. So we want to come above this little rolling cloud here. I didn't quite capture it all, did I? We need to give it a little bit of room to breathe above. Then I know that the photographers probably wanted to include this little rocky outcrop, but does it add to the image? Let's see what happens if we come across a little bit to say there. Now, does that improve our image? Angela, you'll have to be the judge of this. As I see it now, we have a kind of arcing up there. We have this arc up here. We have another one up there. And then we've got our main peninsula. We still have our little pond there. Let's call it a pond. It's obviously an inlet with some fishing boats in. And we've still got some of our mountains in the background. We've got darkness on the edges of our frame. And we can even enhance those dark edges by just coming down like this. Remember from last week? Black conceals and white reveals. So we fill our layer with black, which conceals all those adjustments we've just made. We pick up a white brush and then we just go over our images around the edges just to darken them down a little bit to focus the viewer's eye a little bit more. So I think that maybe strengthens it a little bit. Again, please put some comments on the video. Let me know exactly what you're thinking. And so ends another Friday Feedback. These are getting really popular. The images for this week filled up within a couple of hours of me putting up the post on our group. So I'll be putting up another one over the weekend. So please keep your eyes open and be quick. And I look forward to having a chat about your images next week. Stay safe, everybody. Bye.